Welcome to season 2, episode 2 with our author, Pat Blankenship. Thank you for tuning in to the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop, with your host, me, Lindsay Schultz, owner of the Spine Bookshop. And so today our guest is Pat Blankenship. She is an amazing author of books like Listening Lucas, Marvelous Margot, and several other amazing kids' books. She's one of my favorites. I adore her. We've become very good friends. How are you doing this morning, Pat?
I'm very well, Lindsay. It's Sunday morning, so I'm happy.
No, right. I'm in my pajamas too. So yeah, that's what Sunday is for, is pajamas. So let's.
That's what. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I said that's what Zoom meetings are for. That's what working remotely is for. Get those pajamas on, girl.
Yes,
Love
ma'am.
them.
Yes, ma'am. So let's get into it. How did you get into reading?
Reading. Started reading. All right. So my best memory is that I started reading when I went to school. I don't have any memories of my parents reading books to me.
Okay.
But I fell in love with my school library.
Okay.
And every time we had a library day, I was turning a book in and checking out another. And so that was what was helping me read constantly. And then during the summers, when the school library was not available, I was going to our public library, the let me say it again, Mildred G. Fields Public Library of Milan, Tennessee.
Nice.
And checking out books all summer long, and I just read constantly.
Same. Super same. So,
yeah. Yeah.
What was your
I
favorite
don't know what
book?
that was about. My favorite books were biographies.
Yeah.
I read, there was a series, and I've looked them up. They are still sort of available, but they look different.
Okay.
But it was a series of biographies called I Was There When.
I remember those.
And then it was like George Washington was a boy, or Clara Barton became a nurse, And
Yep.
so I was reading all, they were simplified biographies for children, and I was inspired by all of them. I loved them all.
Oh, I remember all of those. And now they have a version of who is so and so and so and so. And so they're biographies for kids, but they have names like who is George Washington, who is Thurgood Marshall, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I love that. Why biographies?
I don't know that I can tell you, except that the narrative, the story of those people's lives captured me.
Sure.
And I went from biography to reading fiction.
Okay.
And wound up majoring in English literature in college. So it was the narrative, it was the story, it brought me into the story and allowed me to experience it in a way that, reading my social studies book didn't do.
Sure. Well, and I've always said that about history, that history is really interesting if you get someone to tell you a story, not throw dates at you.
Absolutely, yes.
Because
you can tell the story and then plug the dates in for context, but the story is the only thing that's going to capture your imagination.
Absolutely. And I've said that on multiple occasions. Like my daughter, one time was like, I hate history. It's so boring. And I said, what are you working on right now? And so she was talking about like George Washington and the Revolutionary War and that kind of stuff. And I said, well, do you know who Paul Revere is? And she said, no. And I told her the story of Paul Revere. And I was like, and he got on his horse and he was racing through town, desperately screaming, trying to warn people. And she was like, I didn't know that. And I said, read your textbook. And so she read the book and it was the same story, but it was clinical. And so she said,
Yes.
that's not the same story. I was like, that is exactly the same story.
And it just made no difference to her in a clinical setting
No, I
whatsoever.
said, when you really look at what history did, and I told her about Rosewood and Tulsa. I told her about the Stonewall riots. I've talked to her about a bunch of stuff, and I've said nonstop, look, history is boring if you have someone who makes it boring. But if you really look at what people have done, you have to break it down to people, not
That's
events.
right. That's right. And what people have done is freaking amazing.
Oh
Like,
gosh,
what?
right?
They did
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
What people have
Madame
done,
Curie.
great. Oh
Madame
my
Curie
God.
did what?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and then you look at terrible things in history and you look at what, like, say, pick the Holocaust. You see people that did things that they did, but ultimately, those things that they did saved lives or they changed the way people viewed survivors, and it's
Yeah.
significant to me what some of them did.
Yes,
I
it
love history.
is.
I think history is fascinating.
I do too.
So, if you could have, okay, so since we're talking about biographies, is there a biography that has been not been made into a movie yet that you would really love to see made into a movie?
Hmm. Um, no, I don't know how to think about biographies in the context of movies. The movies are less of a benchmark for me. I will tell you the most recent biography that I read,
Hmm.
and it wasn't actually a biography, it was a fictionalized version of Jackie Kennedy Onassis's life.
Okay.
And so the book is named Jackie. I can look up the author so your listeners can look it up. But it is a narrative, it's a novel, but it tracks all of the history within which she was existing and interacting.
Is it the
And
one
I
by
learned
Dawn
stuff.
Tripp?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is it the one by Dawn Tripp?
Yes, that's it. You're looking it up. Good job. Yes. Yeah, it's a great, great novel. Um, and I just loved being in a history that I actually lived through and experienced and learning inside details about what was happening and what was going on. And then probably the best biography I've ever read was the biography of John Adams, the founder John Adams,
Yeah, yeah.
and the story of the Revolution and the Constitution, and how his family, his wife. What was his wife's name? Do you recall? His wife's role in not only holding down the family and the farm while he was off lawmaking and nation building,
Abigail
but
Adams.
yes, Abigail, um, the words of counsel and advice that she had for him. She played an integral part in his thinking, and then he would take that to the Constitutional Convention, for instance, and apply that to all the debates and negotiations they were having. Now, Abigail said to him, "Do not forget the ladies when you write this Constitution." And he was able to push that aside, as you know, and ignore that piece of counsel. But yes, in large measure, she had a lot to do with his thinking and the Constitution.
I find it really interesting how people in general discount women's effect on historical things. And I say that because so my stepfather was a retired Air Force colonel, went to MIT with honors and graduated. Went to
Wow.
West Point, graduated with honors. One of the smartest men that I've ever had the privilege of knowing. Used to do quantitative theory problems for fun. And like,
Okay.
he
He's
was,
Goodwill Hunting.
yes, he was constantly thinking. And like, he knew more about history than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. Like, I remember growing up, we had floor to ceiling, wall to wall bookshelf in our living room that was nothing but military and political history books.
Wow.
Yeah. So I grew up knowing that women played a part in history, and I got thrown out of not one, but two history classes because the first time I was a freshman at Motlow and I had a history professor who was talking about the Revolutionary War and how women didn't have a big, part in that. And I said, I beg your pardon. And I think I was 18 and full of piss and vinegar, of course. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What do you mean women weren't a massive part of the Revolutionary War?" I said, "Women were cooks, women were nurses, women were prostitutes, women were spies, women, did everything for men." I said men would not have survived the Revolutionary War or gotten the information that they got if it were not for women. Well, you're only 18. You don't know what you're talking about. I said, yeah, well, my daddy was a retired Air Force colonel, base commander. So I think that I do actually know what I'm talking about. So he asked me to leave. And I had to go home
He
and
asked you to
tell my
leave the room.
did. And I went home and I said, my stepdad goes, "What are you doing? Don't you have class?" I said, about that. I got asked to leave and he said, "Why?" And I told him and he just kind of just retake it next semester with a different professor. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Well,
after
let me bring that up to date a little bit.
yeah,
Um, I just recently read The Women by Kristen Hanna.
I haven't
The
read that, but I
women,
know of it.
it's good. The women are the women who served in the military in the Vietnam War. So, and most of them served as medical personnel. They
Right.
were nurses and they were surgery techs and that sort of thing. So the the heroine of the book, Frankie, goes over to Vietnam. She serves two tours over
Mm-hmm.
there, and
Mm-hmm.
she works in multiple medical facilities, some of which are on the front lines.
Sure.
She's doing surgery while being bombarded with bombs and mortars.
Sure. Sure.
And so she comes home finally, and she didn't know what it was, but she was totally, she had PTSD.
Sure.
And so twice she went to the Veterans Administration for help, and they dismissed her and said, "I don't know why you're here, but there were no women in Vietnam." And she's like, "I'm standing here telling you I was there." And they go, "No, I'm sorry, there were no women there. You'll have to go elsewhere for your care."
It's amazing to me that
It was amazing.
thing. It blows my mind that that's still a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. And that's very recent. I had an interesting conversation with my boys over Christmas. I've got four children, two of which are boys. And they were debating whether times are worse, scarier, harder now or in the 60s. And I was just hearing their conversation in the background. And so then they finally looked at me and said, "Mom, you lived through both. Which was worse, today or the 60s?" And I said, "Well, actually, as I have been listening to you talk about the 60s and the Vietnam War and
Mm-hmm.
the civil rights movement, I have had this reaction. Oh my God, it's too soon. It's too soon. Don't talk about it yet. You know, the way you feel about a tragedy that happened yesterday, I felt the exact same way about the tragedies that occurred, what now? 50, 60 years ago?
Oh, I
It
feel
was
that way now.
traumatic.
I feel
Yeah,
that way now about what's happening
yeah. But it was
as a
traumatic in
woman.
the 60s.
I think
And
it's very much, I think whether it's traumatic or not is dependent on whether you are going through it or you are witnessing it.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like that's two different sets of trauma because witnessing the eradication of your rights as a woman, yes, it makes you angry. But then having it
Yeah.
personally affect you is a different
Hmm.
trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, here's what I have been thinking lately about current events is that we are literally watching an oligarchy being born.
yep.
We have we are watching the ultra rich take control of government
Mhm.
and get their control via huge cash payments
Yep.
to the others in government. So I don't know any other definition for
Well, look
oligarchy.
what's happening in Rutherford County. So you had a school board who had a group of librarians whose sole job was to pick a list every year for schools to read. They disbanded the group, started banning books. Then they decided that the amount of books they wanted to ban was too much. So they re enlisted the librarian committee, had them spend their entire Christmas vacation going through and reading the books, writing notes about the books and giving their recommendations, and then had those very same librarians sit in the school board meeting where these 8 people went through the recommendations, and knowing that the law told them that they couldn't do this, said, yeah, screw it. We're going to remove them from the libraries anyway. Thanks for your hard work, but we don't want to understand or agree with anything that you say. And the whole winter break time that you spent doing this, it wasn't important.
You got your
Um,
$1,000. No big deal.
and so
So,
sitting
so
here
I've
watching
been.
that, if you go back and you watch the school board, you can watch me become physically agitated as the meeting went on and leaning over to talk to Frank and talking to Carrie. And it was all I could do sitting in that meeting, listening to them and watching the librarians cry through this meeting, like visibly and audibly sobbing through this meeting. It was all I could do not to stand up and go, what in the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah. So
Are
I've been wanting to ask you that was the question I've been wanting to ask you. I was reading in the paper that 6 specific books were banned.
yeah.
And that's the question. Were they recommended for banning
Yep, I
by
can
these
actually answer that
librarians?
question. So if you go to the I can actually pull this up because this is the thing that made me so mad. So let me pull this up and I can tell you because I sent it to a poet, Andy Kopic, who we were talking about this the other night. So what they did was they went through and they reviewed all these books. Okay. So for example, Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe. Here is what this was what the librarian said.
Okay.
Does not meet the criteria for obscenity based on the Miller test. Does not meet the terms as defined by 39-17-901 and It is Common Sense Media recommends this book for ages 18 and up. Kirkus recommends this book for ages 14 and up. Publishes Weekly, 12 and up, so on and so forth, right? So the response from the Librarians Committee was there is no nudity as defined by Title 39, but reviewers point out that two characters are assumedly without clothes dancing in the rain laughing. The word masturbate is used on page 219, but is not describing the act, nor does it occur. And on page 300, a euphemism is used, shaking hands with your best friend. So the library decided that they did not think that this book was obscene and it should absolutely be kept in the library. Okay. So this is what they determined. This group of librarians who all knew exactly, they've all approved this book. They're the ones that put it on here, right? So
Yeah.
the librarians decided this should be kept in. Okay. The school board decided to remove it. Okay.
Right.
Then the other one that they removed was Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. The library committee said it does not meet the criteria for obscenity. It does not meet, it's perfectly fine. Should be kept in the school. Okay. It's categorized as an African-American coming-of-age story that discusses overcoming adversity and responsible decision-making. There's an implied sex scene. Nudity and a sex act are implied but not described, and it also discusses teen parenthood. The scenes are not meant to arouse, but to support the overarching themes in the book. And reviewers stated that this book is a great platform for discussing themes such as the consequences of our actions, power of resilience, importance of support systems, race, poverty issues. Okay. And it says it reflects real conflicts and situations that students face. It was removed. Eleanor Park is the same way. No content whatsoever that falls within the obscenity definition. They're based on professional reviews. There's a prevalence of explicatives, and reviewers recommended this book for a high school audience. And it is a text is important reflection of the Asian American experience and reflects a variety of viewpoints as required of school libraries and the Tennessee Rule 0520-01-2-07 and listed in board policy. It was removed.
All right, so let me stop you just for a second because you've answered my question. Absolutely,
A
yes.
lot.
The librarians, yeah, I know. The librarians recommended that we keep it, and the board removed anyway.
Yeah.
Did the board address their thinking or reasoning behind those
They
decisions?
declared that they all thought they were obscene, so therefore they removed them, regardless of what.
What
Uh,
the librarians or
they,
Kirkus or anybody
yeah,
thought?
they said, yeah, they don't think it's
Okay.
obscene, but we do, so we're going to remove it. Same thing with
I'm so
I'm not
happy
your
that we
perfect.
have these experts.
Same thing with I'm not your perfect Mexican daughter, Looking for Alaska, Vampire Academy, and Eleanor Park. Now let's talk about Looking for Alaska for a minute. For me personally, I think John Green is one of the most prolifically talented young adult writers that we have right now. And even John Green has come out and said, if you're finding the one sex scene in Looking for Alaska as sexy, something is wrong with you because he purposefully wrote it to be as awkward and uncomfortable and non-sexy as possible because he wanted to emphasize that physical connection is not always important because the very next scene is an emotional connection and it is beautiful.
Oh,
And he wanted to have the juxtaposition,
juxtaposition, yeah.
thank you, struggling with the word, between the two physical scenes versus emotional scenes. And it's also what I describe as one of the most beautiful books on grief that you could ever read, because it
Wow.
demonstrates that grief can be ugly, and it causes your behavior to be horrible sometimes, and you
Yeah.
react in the most awful ways because you're so emotionally distraught that you don't know how to deal with all of these emotions. And I think it's vital that
Yeah.
kids know that. And there's nothing sexual about that book. I've read it twice, but because the school board was like, oh, it has a sex scene in it, that's awkward, because sex is never, awkward or anything. God forbid that we demonstrate that. Yeah, and
We
to
all
me,
know
it was just
exactly
like,
what we're doing.
why did you guys waste the time and money on making these librarians read books that they've already read, write reports that they've already written again during their winter break instead of spending time with their
Yeah.
family, and then just basically go, yeah, screw it. We don't
Yeah, no.
we're just, because regardless, all of this is illegal according to state and federal law. So it is very
Has
likely going to result in a lawsuit, the third one for Rutherford County in 3 years, I believe, which
mhm, for
will,
violating people's constitutional rights.
and the amount of money that we're going to have to pay for the third time,
Yeah.
I, I don't, and you know who's going to be paying for that lawsuit? Not the school board, the
The
citizens of
taxpayers.
Rutherford County, the taxpayers.
And we're paying to defend that lawsuit when we are actually on the other side of that issue.
Yes.
But it's our money
And
that's going to
considering
support the
too
other
that the
argument.
Rutherford County Library, or I'm sorry, the Rutherford County School Board basically said that they don't care that they're going to get sued. They're going to do what God tells them to do. And I don't have a problem with God. I don't have a problem with any of that. I have a problem with organized religion telling me how to raise my kids and what I can and cannot do. I talk to God all the time. But
I know you call on him all the time. Oh my God.
all the time. And I just, yeah. So I would say, getting back to the topic of, is the 60s more scary or now more scary? For you,
Right.
probably the 60s was more scary because you were young and it was directly affecting you and you were watching what was going on. Same thing for me now, watching what's going on and being an
Right.
active member in what's happening.
Right.
It's
Right.
terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's terrifying.
And I think every generation
Yeah,
is that way.
my boyfriend, when I was in college, my boyfriend, who was 3 years older than me, was still in high school. He was not brilliant. Neither was I, apparently, because I chose
Nobody
him.
in high school is really brilliant. We're all kind of a mess.
But he was 1A. I mean, we watched the lottery every quarter. I think they did it once a quarter, and started and drew numbers for who was going to get drafted
That's
to see if
terrifying.
his number came up. It's terrifying.
I cannot,
Terrifying.
like, I watched a movie. Have you ever seen The Trial of the Chicago 8 or 7? Can't remember.
I don't think I've seen it. I lived through that.
Oh my God. So
Yeah, I did.
I watched
I
the
don't think
movie
I've seen the movie.
and I have subsequently read the book, because the book includes the actual trial transcript, which I love legal
I love the trial
stuff.
transcripts.
Me too.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I knew who Gabby Hoffman was, and I really want to read a biography about Gabby Hoffman, because at the time before I watched the movie, I thought Gabby Hoffman was just this crazy acid tripping hippie with a loud mouth, you know.
All right. So let me stop you just for a second. You're saying Gabby Hoffman, but his name is Abby
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hoffman.
Thank you, Abby Hoffman. I
A-B-B-Y.
apologize.
And
No,
his poetry is out there. You can read his writings
I want
and
to.
know exactly
Yeah.
thinking and doing. Go ahead. I'm
Well,
sorry.
so in the movie, they're going through and they're, the prosecutors laying out their case, right? And they're trying to give you the timeline of what's happened and all this kind of stuff. Okay. The defense is trying, and I know that you know what happened, but in the movie, the defense is trying to determine which person that they want to put up to speak for all of them. I kept thinking that they were going to put, I can't think of what his name is. The guy who plays, anyway, it's not important. They were going to put the young, preppy, nice looking white bread guy, right?
Yeah.
Until they find out that he said something that would absolutely get him skewered on the stand. So they end up putting Abby Hoffman. And through the whole movie, you see Abby Hoffman being the voice of reason more times than I expected him to be. And so when and I will say that Sacha Baron Cohen played him in the movie, and I have not always been a fan of him in movies, but in this movie, I fell in love with him as an actor because of his role in this movie. And so he sits there and he's talking to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor asks him something, and he says the best line that will stick with me for the rest of my life. I don't know. I've never been prosecuted for my thoughts before. I remember watching that and just being, oh my God. Because in 1982, the Think Police or the Thought Police, the same thing. We were talking about that last night in our book club about how, I would be caught up in a hot mess because if my mouth doesn't say it, my face will. There is no way that I could school my face to not look at you like you are absolutely the dumbest person I have ever met in my whole life. And it would just be, I'm sorry, we're doing what? Like, there would be no way. I would get scooped up by the thought police so fast it wouldn't even be funny. But I just remember sitting there, and I think about that all the time. I've never been prosecuted for my thoughts before. And it's one of those lines that when you hear it, you have to sit and think about it for a second because it is such a terrifying statement because that is what's happening.
And let me update that statement a little bit in regards to your personal fight against removing books from libraries. You might say, I've never been persecuted for my thoughts before.
Because I absolutely am. I mean, I've had to remove comments off Facebook. I've had to kick people out of my shop. I've been called a groomer. I've been called a smut peddler, which is not necessarily wrong considering some of the authors that I have in my shop, and I'm totally here for it. I have been called a heathen, a bad Christian. So, I've been called all kinds of names, and I used to think it bothered me. Now I'm like,
let it go.
Bring it.
Yeah. It's like I used to say about parenting teenagers. If your teenagers are not mad at you, you're doing something wrong.
Right. Yes, then I must be the best parent ever right now because my kid is 13 and thinks that I'm just ruining her life. So
you're on the right path there, Mom.
I just, I realize, and I say this, I realize that books have the power to change your thinking, change your mind, make you have ideas that maybe might not be the best ideas, or sometimes they are the best ideas. And as a parent, you may not want your kid to read that yet, or you think that your kid isn't quite like, for example, one of the books that they banned was Speak, about a girl in high school who gets assaulted and nobody knows, but everybody thinks that she narked on a party, but that's not actually what happened. And it's all about her trying to navigate freshman year of high school as an assault victim, totally alone. And I remember when it happened to me in college, I felt very alone because I was basically told that no one would believe me and that it was my fault, long story short. And I had someone give me that book. And had I not had someone give me that book, I don't know how I would have been able to process my own trauma. So for them to be able to take that away from people makes me insanely angry. And like my kid wanted to read it, and my kid is 13. And I realized the girl in the book, I think, is 14 or 15. And I told my kid, I said, I'm happy to let you read it. Give it one more year. I want you to get one more year of maturity before you read it. I'll read it with you and we'll talk about it. I have no problem with her reading stuff, but there's definitely a maturity level that needs to be applied. But what the school board is doing is not even allowing for that. They're just flat out removing the books, period, and not even giving parents the opportunity. And not even that, because parents aren't taking the opportunity because it's there for them to find out what the reading list is. And if you don't want your kid to read that, cool. Have that conversation with your kid's teacher or your kid's librarian. They have processes in place for that.
So here's the dichotomy then that is happening. Those who support parents' rights to parent their own children are literally taking away the parent's right to parent in regards to this book or that book or whichever book has been removed.
Yes. And people are asking why. Why are they doing this? And it's just like when you get into 1984, one of the things that they say that every time I read it, it made me just uncomfortable. And I realize that it's supposed to, but it's those 3 lines that say, what is it? Freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and war is peace. And we talked about how the government wants you to be ignorant, because if you're ignorant, you don't know that your rights are being taken away or that your rights are being violated. So if you're ignorant and you're not aware of what's happening, you can't fight back.
Right. And so if we don't know about oligarchy, if we're not educated about Russia's form of government and oligarchies, then we don't recognize it when it's happening in our own country.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's to their benefit. And the less we know, the better for them.
Well, and somebody joked, and one of my friends who felt she needed to apologize to me, and I told her she absolutely did not. She was like, you seem a little angry about all this, and she was just poking at me. And, I told her, I was like, yeah, I am angry. We should all be angry. The day that I'm not angry about this means that I've become apathetic and don't care anymore. And that terrifies me more. Is the fact that they've finally broken me down, that I just don't care anymore, and I'm just willing to lay down and accept it. And I want to be angry. I tell people, stay angry, fight back. Because the day that you don't, the day that you stop caring, the day that you're just like, yeah, okay, fuck it, this is just our life now, I would be so sad at myself that that's finally where I am, that I just don't care anymore. I don't want to be like that.
There's a different word. I think apathy definitely works, but there's a different attitude. I can't think of the right word for it, but it's sort of like giving up. It's not I don't care anymore. It's like I just don't believe I can affect change anymore. Mm-hmm. I have given up on.
You're fine.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's the weather. My nose has been running nonstop for a week, so I'm right there with you.
But giving up is, or losing hope, or becoming cynical. Mm-hmm. It's also a great temptation.
Oh, absolutely.
At these times, it's almost like Just let it play out. Let it play out. It's bound to
You're talking
wear
about
itself out.
surrendering or resigning yourself?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I had a friend once who actually was in politics. He worked in politics for his entire career,
sure.
and he said that politics was like a pendulum, that it would swing way, way left, and then it would come back to center and swing way, way right.
Hmm.
And that right now the pendulum was up there on, way, way right, but it would come back to center.
I just
And
wanted to stay in the center.
I don't know how long it's though. I mean, it feels like it's been way, way, way up on, an extreme top of the swing, and it seems to get stuck there. It seems to me that I mean he must have been talking about over the course of years. He
Sure,
told me this like in 2015. We talked about this in 2015 and 2016.
sure.
Um, so it's like I want it to play out, but also I'm like, how long does it take for it to play out?
Yeah.
And you know what answers that question? History.
Yep.
Only history can tell us how long that will take.
But if people aren't willing to learn about history and learn from history, then what are we doing?
That's a great question. What are we doing?
Because
I
I mean,
don't know.
the Holocaust happened where Jewish people were put in internment camps. And
Yeah.
then we did the exact same thing to Asian people. And then when COVID happened, we turned on Asian people so fast. It
Yeah.
wasn't Asian people, it was the Asian government, but it wasn't Asian people. And I don't even know if that's entirely true. You
Yeah. Who
know?
knows? We don't even know what's entirely true
But
in
you would
that
think
regard.
that we would look at that and go, oh, yeah, that was a terrible thing. Holocaust was horrible. What are we doing to Hispanic people down at the border? We're putting them in internment camps. We're putting Muslim people in Gitmo. So clearly, we have not learned from anything. We turn such a blind eye. And I love, have you ever seen the newsroom with Jeff Daniels?
Oh yes, great movie.
No, 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 no. The TV show. It's got Jeff
Oh
Daniels.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
I have.
yeah.
Yes,
That one scene where he answers that girl's question, can you answer why? And he does that whole monologue about how we're not the world's best country anymore. I have never felt that. Like, I felt it on a DNA level watching that. And that one scene made me watch the whole show. And I was
yeah,
really sad that it was only 3 seasons because
yeah. I
listening
was
to
too. I
him,
hated when that.
oh, yeah. Well, listening to him say all that stuff and then stop and pause and then go, but we used to be. We used to do
Yeah.
this and this and this. And he's right. It is absolutely correct. And I say all the time, I want to be I want to be able to look back on myself and what's happening right now and say, at least I tried. At least I stood for something.
Yeah.
At least I went down fighting, trying to do something for people who don't have the will or ability to stand up for themselves. I tried. And it's costing me. It is costing me. But the cost is not outweighing the benefit of me being able to look my friends in the face.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to be able to look myself in the mirror. So, as someone from a
There's a
different generation who's basically watching history repeat itself, what is that? What is that like for you?
um I'm not sure I know in my heart and my soul um when I see history repeating itself, the so much of what we as a country have experienced often takes place behind closed doors, or it doesn't get retained in the collective memory. Now, I don't know if you know Rachel Maddow,
I love
or
her.
if you,
Oh
yeah,
God, I love
or
her
if you have
so much.
ever listened to her podcast.
I haven't, but
She's
now I
got
will.
she's got two podcasts, one of which is based on the story of Spiro Agnew,
I like
who
him.
had to resign from Nixon's White House because he
Right,
was accused of corruption. And
right.
the second, and I find this even more troubling, the second is based on the 1940s movement within the United States, pro Hitler and pro Nazi.
Yeah,
And this movement included Congress people, congressmen, I can say, they were all men,
sure,
congressmen who were using their federal franking services, which means they're allowed free postage to send stuff out to their constituents.
sure,
They were
sure.
using their governmentally provided free franking services to send out pro-Nazi, pro-Hitler propaganda, literally written by the German government and provided to them, to the American people. And it's worse than that. There were murders, and there was a lot of intrigue around that. But these people were literally in Congress working
Yeah,
for the German government. So I know we obviously have uh, people in Congress today that you would wonder what the heck about them as well. I won't
sure.
accuse anybody of anything
No,
because
no,
I
no,
don't
yeah.
know, but yeah, that was terrifying to me, that government could be infiltrated
Mm-hmm.
so completely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, we don't. Here's the thing you said a while ago. Why don't we learn? Learning requires curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and curiosity never takes place in the presence of arrogance. So if I am arrogant
I want to
enough,
write that down. Hang on. I let me find a pencil because that is brilliant. Hang on. You said, okay, say that again. You said curiosity, what now?
learning requires curiosity,
Uh,
and curiosity never exists in the presence of arrogance.
that is that is a brilliant line.
So if I am arrogant, I think I know everything. I am no longer curious enough to ask,
Yes.
is there a better way? What happened when we tried that 10 years ago? Should we consider another avenue? Because I think I know everything. I'm arrogant enough to think I know everything. That my way is the only way. My way is the right way.
My stepfather always said, don't ever be the smartest person in the room because the minute you become the smartest person in the room, you stop learning. And there's something that you can
Stop learning.
from
And
everybody.
yeah, and life as we know it is over when we stop learning.
I agree. Well, Pat, I love you, and we could sit and talk all day, but we are about out of time. So, thank you guys all so much. And I love how one question goes in 15,000 different directions. I love that. So, thank you
And
so
there's
much.
no way to know where it's
No,
going.
I know it's great. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me this morning. I really, really appreciate it. And thank
It's
you
my
guys all.
pleasure. I'm sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
I said, it's my pleasure. I got to enjoy my third cup of coffee with you. Sundays are my third cup of coffee day
Sure.
and the entire New York Times day.
Yeah.
Um, so I love Sundays.
Well, I really
Thanks
appreciate.
for having me on.
Absolutely.
I
You're
love
one of my
talking to you.
favorites. Oh, you're one of my favorites. Thanks
Thank you.
everybody else for tuning in and listening to season 2, episode 2 of the Spine Bookcast. Please make sure to like, follow, and share. And definitely email us if you have any people you'd like to see on the podcast or you have any questions. Have a great day and happy reading, you guys.